Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the first online LPU classroom. Today we'll be talking about asymmetrical versus symmetrical liquidity pool LPs, price exposure, impermanent loss or IL, impermanent loss protection or ILP. How do we actually calculate redeemable value of the LPs? And a couple of example calculations. So first of all, in an LP in THORChain, it is always a 50-50 exposure of the two assets. And in THORChain, all the pools are paired with rune. So for example, in the BTC pool, it is always 50% rune and 50% BTC when you are in the pool. So a symmetrical deposit, which means you deposit 50% of both assets, is the natural way to deposit into the liquidity pool. But there is an option to deposit asymmetrically as well. For example, you might not have any rune, you might not even have a rune wallet or a rune address. You only have BTC and you only have BTC address. You can still provide your BTC into the BTC rune liquidity pool on THORChain. So you provide 100% BTC, but the THORChain protocol will automatically split your deposit back to the 50-50%, which is similar to the symmetrical pooling after you entered the pool. So it's easy, or it's best to think once you enter the pool, you are no longer holding just the BTC, but you are always exposed to both assets. The other caveat is that if you deposit asymmetrically, THORChain only knows your BTC address. It doesn't have any knowledge of your rune address. Therefore, when you elect to withdraw, THORChain can only send assets back to your BTC address. So at the moment of withdrawal, only at the moment of withdrawal, THORChain will convert the rune portion back into BTC, and therefore you withdraw only the BTC. But as long as you are in the pool, you still continue to be exposed to both assets. Whereas for symmetrical pooling, THORChain knows both the addresses of your rune and also your BTC, and therefore you can select to withdraw either both symmetrically or just the rune or just the BTC. But again, if you choose to withdraw in one asset, only at the point of withdrawal, then THORChain will convert the other asset back to the asset of choice for withdrawal, and then you withdraw that single asset. So especially on asymmetrical pooling, it's good to talk a little bit about price exposure. Right? On the top right, you can see a Medium article by LPU, which basically talks about this example. The example is an asymmetrical entry of 1,000 rune at $10 per rune, and therefore you entered with $10,000 worth. Remember, it is rebalanced to 50-50 immediately when you entered the pool. And for this case, if the rune price was at $10, and let's say it's a BTC pool and the BTC price was at 50K, and the split will be $5,000 each for the both assets, and you end up holding 500 rune and 0.1 BTC. This is a simplified example that does not account for slippage, because the act of swapping half your entry into the other asset automatically by THORChain will incur some slippage depending on your volume of your entry and also the pool depth. But if we don't account for slippage on an easy level, it is split half to half. Let's say the price of BTC changes to 30K, drop from 50K to 30K. Remember, you are now holding two assets 50-50, even if you entered asymmetrically. So you are still holding 500 rune and 0.1 BTC essentially. And if the BTC prices drop, the value of your BTC in the pool also drops. And when you choose to exit or withdraw asymmetrically, of course, you can only withdraw in rune because you entered with rune. At the point of withdrawal, THORChain will then convert this 0.1 BTC back to rune. But since the 0.1 BTC at the moment of withdrawal is now only worth 30k and rune price is still $10 per rune, the 0.1 BTC at 30k or $3,000 worth of BTC is only converted back to 300 rune. And 300 rune plus the 500 rune originally, you are exiting with 800 rune. And so it is wrong to assume I entered with 1,000 rune, I must be protected for my 1,000 rune. Why am I withdrawing only 800 rune? So the answer is that yes, you entered with 1,000 rune, but once you entered, it is split 50-50. And it is only after the split that we should be basing all our calculations. And from now on, from this point on, I will be only talking about after the split, right? Whether you entered symmetrically or if you entered asymmetrically, the easier way is always to think on the 50-50 of both assets. Just a quick note as well that when the prices change, there will be impermanent loss. We will talk about this a little while later. But for this example and these numbers, we are also ignoring impermanent loss at this point just to keep it simple. This is a very similar example, but it is about a stable coin pool, right? So there were a lot of questions as well. I entered again 1,000 rune asymmetrically. Hey, I understand it is split 50-50, right? So 500 rune and 5,000 USD in this example. But the question was, USD is a stable coin. I do not have price exposure to a stable coin pool because stable coin will always maintain at $1. Again, the mindset is you are not just holding 1,000 rune anymore, right? You're holding 500 rune and 5,000 USD. You are not holding 1,000 rune. So in this example, the rune price change from $10 to $15. The 50% of the rune, which is 500 rune, is now worth $7,500. But you remember, you are also holding the 5,000 USD, which of course is still worth 5,000 USD. And then you click asymmetrical exit. This 5,000 USD converted back to rune at the point of exit because the rune price has went up from $10 to $15. The 5,000 USD is converted to 333.3 rune. And added to the 500 rune again, you are withdrawing a total of 833.3, which is $12,500, right? 5,000 from here and $7,500 from here. So a wrong concept is saying that I have 1,000 rune into the pool. When I entered, it was $10. When I exit, it was $15. Shouldn't I have $15,000 during exit? And the answer is no, because you no longer have 1,000 rune once you enter the pool. Yeah. So hope it's clear. Always think 50-50. So now we go on to impermanent loss, right? All the previous two examples about price exposure are still not touching impermanent loss at all. So price exposure is not protected by impermanent loss protection, right? So all those losses, if you can say in the previous two slides, those are just price exposure. If you hold those assets in your wallet and do LP, when the price drops, you will also lose the same amount. It has sort of nothing to do with the losses caused by the LP, which means we define it as an impermanent loss. So now we will talk about what actually is impermanent loss. Again, on the top right is a a link to a Medium article by LPU, and I took this example from there. So wasting 50-50, yeah? So now we are entering 1,000 rune and 3,500 USDC at $3.5 rune price, and therefore this is an symmetrical entry, worth total of $7,000. And let's assume that rune price went up, right? $3.5, and now the rune price is $8. The worth of 1,000 rune is $8,000 right now, right? From 3,500 to 8,000, you still have 3,500 USDC. The price remains the same. And so the total value of your pool is $11,500. So this is the, I'll break this down step by step, right? So once the rune price goes up, the pool rebalances caused by arbitrageurs rebalancing the pool and taking some profit on the way. So if you remember the concept about LPs, the two assets are always rebalanced back to 50-50 in value anytime the price changes, right? So conceptually, yes, 1,000 rune is worth $8. And so if you do not yet talk about IL or impermanent loss, just conceptually, what does it mean by rebalancing back to 50-50? That 1,000 rune will reduce down to 719 rune at $8, and the 3,500 USDC will go up to 5,750 USDC. And 718.75 rune at $8 is worth $5,750, and therefore it's balanced again. So some people describe this as the protocol selling your rune for USDC, right? Selling the higher price asset for the lower price asset, so that the dollar amount for both assets are still 50-50. But the act of rebalancing, and it is actually the arbitrageurs who buy your rune and sell you USDC into the pool, that rebalance this, and they will take a profit. In the act of them rebalancing the pool, they are not doing it for free, they are actually profit hunters. Mathematically, the way this liquidity pool mathematics work, when they rebalance the pool, they will take a cut of the profit, and therefore your worth of your pool is now 10583, right? So again, 50-50 split. So where did the impermanent loss is the difference between this $11,500 and $10,583, and it's just a factor of the mathematics of the protocol, of the coding used in setting up this sort of a continuous liquidity pool. And the IL can be defined by this mathematical equation, where K is the price ratio divergence. So first, what was the price ratio of the two assets when you entered? In a stable coin pool, it's a bit easier to calculate because one of the asset is always $1. But the price ratio of this is 3.5 over $1. The new price ratio is $8 over $1, right? And you can use the same equation for a non-stable coin pool, right? Rune BTC as well. But you just calculate what is your initial price ratio and what is your new price ratio. And so the new price ratio, for this case, $8 over 1, or 8, divided by 3.5 is 2.29. So K is 2.29. You plug it into this IL equation, and you can calculate that the IL is about 8%. Right. So this chart is basically calculating this equation based on the K on the x-axis, right? So 200% K, or 2, is basically the price ratio doubles. For ours, because it went from 3.5 to 8, it's slightly more than double, is 2.29 or 229%. So at 229% price ratio divergence, the impermanent loss is about 8%. And this is the 8% which is extracted as profit by the ARBs, 8% of $11,500. Excuse me. So you end up with 10,583, right? And impermanent loss is called impermanent because if the price ratio went back to the original price ratio, right? If the rune price went down back to $3.50, again, arbitrages will come in and rebalance it back down. But you realize that the impermanent loss went back to zero based on the original entry, right? If so, impermanent loss can contract and expand depending on how the price move between the two assets. And so TC, right, THORChain have this impermanent loss protection. It does not protect price exposure, but it protects that 8% impermanent loss, for example, from the last example. And every time you think about impermanent loss or impermanent loss protection or ILP, again, it is always based on the 50-50, right? So if it's a symmetrical entry, it's easy. You will be protected for your full entry because it is already 50-50. For asymmetrical, remember, it gets rebalanced. Then only the ILP will be protecting the 50-50. The ILP does not protect the full 100% of the asymmetrical entry. So think 50-50, protect the 50-50, that should make much more sense. Yeah, let's zoom in a little about how does this all comes together, right? So first you have your deposit, always 50-50, yeah? If you do asymmetrically after the split, so always think about 50-50. This is your added amount, and it's good to think about it as your holder value. It's not really the USD value, it is really the token value, the 500 rune and the 0.1 BTC, for example. You can think of it as, what if you hold those two assets in your wallet without adding into LP? What would be the worth of that, right? The price will go up and down, but you still have those two assets, right? One BTC is always one BTC, one rune is always one rune. But once you deposit into the LP, you start to accrue earnings, right? Earnings from the swap fees, earnings from block rewards, and earnings will just go up. It is accrued every block, every THORChain block, which is about 5 to 6 seconds. And over time, the earnings will just keep on increasing. It will not reduce, right? So the longer you maintain your assets in the pool, the more your earnings grow. But we have also talked about impermanent loss. And remember, this impermanent loss, it depends on the price ratio change or the price ratio divergence of those two assets. And depending on how those two prices change, it could contract or it could expand. It could be more, it could be less, right? So your final redeemable, when you click withdraw 100%, your redeemable is your deposit or your holder value. Let's say what you have deposit, subtract the impermanent loss. Right? It is a loss, so your deposit minus the loss, but you add the earnings. Right, so your deposit minus the loss, add your earnings, and therefore is equivalent to what you will actually redeem or withdraw. And then you can compare how much you withdraw versus how much is your holder value or your deposit value. Right? If you had only hodled in your wallet, compared to what you can withdraw from the LP, for this case, it was more than your hodled value because your earnings were more than your IL. And so even though you face IL, you are not eligible for impermanent loss protection because ILP takes into account the total, right, redeemable. If your total redeemable is more than your hodled value, because your earnings are more than your IL, you are not eligible for ILP. Whereas this is the example where you do get ILP, right? Because the earnings are smaller than your IL, and therefore, if you do not have ILP, your redeemable before ILP is from here to here, right? It is only the length of here until here, which is of course smaller than your holded value, and therefore ILP kicks in at the point of withdrawal to make you whole, right? And essentially, you get exactly the same amount as if you just hold it in your wallet. The actual amount of tokens withdrawn in both assets might be slightly different because price change rebalance 50-50, but the value of those two tokens, and you can convert one for the other after you withdraw. The value, the total value of those two assets will be exactly the same as if you have just put it into your wallet and did nothing with it. Let's look at a real example, right? This is actual LP, liquidity pool position in THORChain, and on the left is the Thor Yield iOS app, right? It's the same position, and this on the right is just a screenshot from the Thor swap withdrawal page, right? Liquidity page, and I click withdrawal and I push it to 100%. So you can see that we added in 17th of February, I guess, right? This amount, right? The added amount. So we added this amount of Rune and this amount of ETH at the prices during the addition, during the deposit in 17th of February. That equates to this dollar value, right? Again, this amount of Rune and this amount of ETH at the prices during deposit equates to about $15,400. And then, we have been in the pool for about 42 days. And if I click withdraw right now, you can see here, if I click withdraw 100%, right, what I withdraw will be basically all my share, right, which is this number here, Rune and ETH, which is the same as this number here, the redeemable amount shown on THORChain. At today's prices, this redeemable amount is $27,400. But if I compare to just holding this amount, just holding 1,790 Rune and 2.5 ETH in my wallet, when the price has changed to today's pricing, compared to my current redeemable is actually less than the holded value by about $1,700. Again, because of there was some impermanent loss, and these earnings, the fee earnings and the block rewards, were not able to cover the impermanent loss, and therefore the total withdrawable is less than the holded amount, and I am eligible for ILP, right? But because I've only been in the pool for about 42 days, and ILP less than 100 days is prorated, right? About 1% per day. So I'm protected for 42% of this amount. So 42% of this loss at today's Rune prices would be about 60 Rune, right? You can do the math. 60 Rune at 1160 is about 42% of this value. So this is how we interpret the Thor yield, especially. Right? I just want to share, if you want to look at the deeper numbers, I have a simple Excel sheet, right, where you can plug in the numbers, and maybe it gives us a little bit more clarity of what is happening. The bottom three pictures are the same Thor yield iOS display from the previous page, just so you can match the numbers. So in my simple Excel, I have the start date, I have the entry Rune amount, 1790, I have the entry asset amount, ETH amount, right, 2.474, and I know my total value, dollar value of the entry at the prices during entry. And so since I know that it is always a 50-50, so this is the dollar value of the ETH during entry and the dollar value of the Rune during entry. This is 50% of this, and this is 50% of this. And so I know the dollar value, I know how much ETH I put in, I know the price of ETH during entry, which is 3001, and the price of Rune during entry, which is $4.30. So this is the total US dollar value during entry based on entry prices again. This is the ratio of the two prices of the asset. right? So that I can use that to calculate impermanent loss later. On the 31st of March, 42 days later, Rune price has increased to 1160, which is 168% price increment. But the ETH price has only increased 8%, right? And therefore, the ratio of the Rune versus asset has changed quite a bit. And it is actually almost 2.5 times change, right? Rune has risen 2.5 times faster than ETH, right? And because we have this number, which is the K value of the price ratio of the two assets have changed by 2.5 times. I can calculate that my LP based on this 2.5 is about 5. Sorry, here the IL, the impermanent loss based on 2.5 K value, or the price ratio divergence, is actually 9.5% impermanent loss. So at the current price, if I were to have holded my 1790 Rune and 2.475 ETH and have not put into LP, if I have just holded them at the current price, it should have been worth 29,000. But because of IL, right, because of impermanent loss, it takes a cut. But I accrued some fees, but this fees is back calculated, right? Because from the THOR yield, I can now know my redeemable is 1100 or 1180 Rune at this price, and my redeemable ETH is 4.07 at this price, and so my pool value or my withdrawable value today is $27,450. So if I take, so I'm still getting a loss compared to holded value, right? Holded value is 29,000, it's only 27,000 now, and this is the same value here. Compared to holded, my LP is at a loss of 1,006, a loss about 5.7%. I had actually 9.5% loss from IL, but my actual loss is only 5.7% because I was earning fees, about $1,000 worth of fees. It's a little bit discrepancy here, probably some rounding errors, right? But $1,000+ of fees, which is about 4.1% of my holder value. So in a sense that I lost 9.5%, I earned 4.1%, I still lose 5.7%. And this is the 5.7% which is protected by ILP, right? The net loss. But again, because I'm only in the pool for 42 days, the ILP will protect 42% of this, which is about 60 Rune at today's prices. So this is the, you can calculate APRs or APYs, right? APYs, I believe THOR uses like monthly compounding cycle to calculate the APY, and therefore you get the 39%. This is where the APY is calculated based on the loss right now here, right? But this APY is both IL and fees, extrapolation, right? And IL, as we know, it can change. It can contract back to zero if the price ratio changes, right? So don't put too much, you understand the concept behind it. And finally, if I just look at the fees itself, 1,100, and sort of simple extrapolation to one whole year, and APR is about 35%. I believe this is the number which is displayed on THORSwap, right? The yield in terms of fees before the IL. Alright, so that's what I have for today. Hopefully it's been useful. Again, a lot of nice Medium articles from LPU. We will probably add on some more and more articles. But hopefully this course, this online class today is useful as well. So thank you very much. Again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for listening.